Welcome to Nightlight. Step away from the mainstream and gather around as we enlighten the world and our realities and travel this cosmic journey we call life. Join us as we share with you and provide that beacon that can guide us all to a better way. Explore with us as we examine a metaphysical montage of spiritual insights, covering everything from the mundane to the magical, UFOs to unicorns, and everything in between. This is a time of awakening, of sharing and evolving, of spreading our wings and soaring on the cosmic breath of creation. Come and join with other light-minded spirits as we weave our lights together to seek understanding, enlightenment, and, with a little luck, some wisdom. This is Nightlight, a reminder that you are never alone.
Welcome, everybody, to Nightlight. We have an amazing show for you. Mark has cornered an amazing man to be on the show today who has a history that, is just awesome as heck. And Mark always surprises me with the amazing people that he finds to get on the show and share their life and their information and their insight and their wisdom with, and talent as well. So, without further ado, Mark, welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks, Barbara. How are you today?
Doing very well. Thank you.
Did you get any sleep after putting together last night's show?
I got about 3 hours sleep. Yes. It was a challenge, but it was worth it, and it's fun to know you can do things like that.
Yeah, that was an excellent show with Merle last night, and we'll try to get through this show with the pole shifting happening, and hopefully we aren't going to lose power. But
would prefer to not.
But I got a little sciencey last night, but today's the conclusion of our trilogy of musical shows. Listeners may think we're trying to apply for a job with Rolling Stone or Vintage Guitar magazines, but we'll hear about that in a little bit. And I guess this week happen to have projects becoming available, and we want to help get the word out. And Barbara and I are honored that they want to share their news with us and all of our listeners on Nightlight. And today's show is going to continue some of Merle's discussion about Jimi Hendrix, and we'll hear a lot more about Woodstock as well. Our guest today is the legendary bluesman and guitar virtuoso Arlen Roth. Perhaps you saw him on a stadium tour with Simon and Garfunkel, or learned to play guitar by watching his Hot Licks guitar tutorial videos. Maybe you'd like to learn more about his role in the movie Crossroads, or being involved with the foundation of the Blues Brothers. Arlen is our guest for the next 2 hours to discuss the release.
Here I am.
Yeah,
there he is.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
Trying to find a moment to jump in there,
Yeah, and Arlen, you have two new CDs we're going to be talking about, and all kinds of other aspects of your astonishing career.
The new CD is really the Telemasters, and the second CD is one I'm doing with Sebastian. That won't be out for a few months from now, but the Telemasters is coming out this month, so that's a big one. That's really a big one.
Okay. So what is the, this is your 16th solo CD.
I think so, yeah. Well, I've had solo vinyl before there were CDs, so I'd say my 16th solo album.
Okay. And what is the concept behind working with the Telemaster or the Telecaster guitar for the Telemaster CD?
Well, it's a follow-up to my Slide Guitar Summit, which was a very big album worldwide, and that was me and other people like Johnny Winter and others playing slide guitar, because I've always been considered sort of a specialist in slide guitar. And I had 9 guests on that album, and I said, a good follow-up to that, I had released my acoustic Rolling Stones album in between, and I said a good follow-up would be to go down to Nashville again and gather together all my Telecaster playing buddies and some people who I respected and who respect me but who we never met before, like a guy like Steve Wariner and, Vince Gill I knew, but Brad Paisley I never met before and all that kind of stuff. So we did a very ambitious project. So I've got 14 Telecaster Masters on the album, me included, and I'm doing duets with all of them, and I have one song on there that's just me, and there's another song on there with just me and my daughter, Lexi, who's a great singer and songwriter in her own right, and she sang Tennessee Waltz. So it's just a very ambitious project. It took a long time because some of these folks were just so busy, But we got Joe Bonamassa on there, Albert Lee, Vince Gill, Steve Cropper, the wonderful rhythm and blues guitar player, on and on and on. Bill Kirchen, Jerry Donahue, Johnny Hyland, Brent Mason, who's the top Nashville studio guitar player and has been for over 20 years. Some of these folks had done videos for me in the past when I had Hot Licks. You had mentioned the Hot Licks tutorial, the Hot Licks videos. So some of them had done videos for me, and some of them actually had learned from those videos. I came full circle with Hot Licks in terms of some people who I ended up signing to Hot Licks were actually people who had originally learned from Hot Licks. So, like Johnny Hyland, he said we used to have to drive 70 miles up in Maine just to get a Hot Licks video. And next thing you know, he, 6 or 7 years later, he was doing 2 of them for me, so.
And how do you go about assembling these big name legendary artists like Albert Lee and Steve Cropper?
Well, they're my buddies, they're my friends, they're my peers. They have just as much respect for me as I do for them. So it's not, in the old days with Hot Licks, it was kind of like at first I had to chase people down because nobody wanted to teach on video or audio tape. I started with audio tapes long before video when I was living right beneath the World Trade Center and in a loft in New York City. And me and my wife, to be at that time, Deborah, I said, well, look, we only have a tiny bit of money left to our names. There were no tours happening at that point. I was sort of like on the road 6 months, then off the road 6 months. And at this point, then it was after the Phoebe Snow tour in 1979, and the phone wasn't ringing. I wasn't getting any work, but I was, of course, always teaching students in between tours. So I said, $1,500 is going to get us a big half-page ad in Guitar Player magazine, where I was already well known, And $500 bought me a used tape recorder across the street, and I'd started it out with 48 lessons, 48, audio cassettes. And then in 1984, when I was doing that film Crossroads you mentioned, that's when I went into video. But it's never been it's not really a problem because these guys all know me. I mean, like Steve Wariner, who was a big country star, all his sons, his kids showed up at the studio because they wanted to meet me because they all learned from my videos. They're like, we want to meet you. We want to get your autograph. I'm like, oh, my God, I can't believe it. These guys are his son. I guess he was too busy to teach them. But, it's a great feeling to be able to know that you've had that much of an effect on people when you don't even realize it. It's like, I think Hot Licks has probably done 2.5 million videos in terms of sales, but you can imagine the pass-on thing, and also now that people just kind of watch them on YouTube, unfortunately, that doesn't make anybody any money, but they watch it. So there's probably tens of millions who have been learning from my tapes. And it doesn't mean me. I also documented 180 artists over the course of 220 videos. So,
okay.
But, guys like Brent Mason, he did one for me 20 years ago. Joe Bonamassa did one for me when he was only 21 years old. Johnny Hyland did 2 of them for me. So, there's a lot of history that I have with these guys, but most of all, we just all respect each other as players, and it took 2 seconds to get any of them. They all wanted to be a part of such a big project.
Yeah, and you just mentioned Joe Bonamassa. He's on Telemaster. He just really seems to be one of those names that has captured people's attention, just very quickly. He's worked with Eric Clapton. He's just like the next generation of blues musicians. What's it like working with the next generation of up and coming blues guys? Are they keeping things pretty traditional, or are they branching out into other?
He's really more he's more of a solo artist who I would say is influenced by the blues, but he's got a lot of sides to him. See, when he did his video for me when he was 21, it was still kind of like Joe Bonamassa doing various, I won't say imitations, but showing his influences very strongly. For example, when he played on this album, it's a complete Albert Collins, tribute. It's exactly like Albert Collins. And, of course, Albert Collins was the first guy who was called Master of the Telecaster, probably named by himself, Now they call me the Master of the Telecaster. I said, well, this album is going to be lots of Masters of the Telecaster, and dedicated to many of the greats. But, Bonamassa, it's uncanny how he was able to sound and phrase exactly like Albert Collins, And then by the end of that song, we're in like a frenzy of blues guitar insanity. But he's, he has very strong influences. Danny Gatton, Albert Collins, Eric Johnson, and Eric Johnson himself is a very eclectic player, He was the biggest selling artist that we ever had on Hot Licks, besides me. But Eric Johnson did 2 videos for me that were huge sellers and won all kinds of awards and stuff.
Another aspect of Telemasters that you just brought up is that you were working with your daughter Lexi. How is working with family in the studio? Is that going smoothly? Are there other challenges involved with it? How does that work?
Well, I think because we're both professionals, we try to just keep it about the music, because she also sang on the Les Paul tribute album that I played on with Keith Richards and everybody, and she did Via con Dios on that. And she's very focused. She's an actress. She's a chef. She does all kinds of incredibly demanding things, and she's like very dedicated and probably the hardest working person I've ever known in my life. And she, when we get in there, it's all business. Obviously, when it's father and daughter, you got to be a little careful in terms of how you handle things, but I handle everybody carefully, so it doesn't really affect it too much. It makes it happier. I mean, I'm so proud of her, so it makes it really a joyful thing for the both of us. And of course, I produced her first album when she was only 15 or 16 years old, and then she sang on that album with me and Levon Helm. So I love bringing her in on projects and giving her that experience, the experience of okay, this is what it's like to work with this one and this one, and then she's also learning as I'm doing that. She's learning about these legendary people like Levon Helm or doing all those things. So it was really cool because she did Tennessee Waltz on this album. Originally, it was supposed to be an instrumental with me and Vince Gill. But Vince Gill wanted to do a different song, so I ended up doing Satisfied Mind with Vince, instrumentally. And then I said, well, Lexi, this is your perfect opportunity to do this song. And that's why I wrote on the thing, I said, on the album, I said, she's going to introduce Tennessee Waltz to a whole new generation. So hopefully that'll happen.
Okay. And is Telemasters like a mix of rock and country?
A lot of blues, a lot of country, a lot of rock, some jazz. Because one of the things that you want to know is that the Telecaster is just a guitar. It's just a model of the guitar, and I don't want it to be stereotyped or typecast. Because a lot of people in country music play tellies, I said, well, but the Telecaster is also for blues and also for rock and also for jazz. That's the beauty of it. It's the first electric guitar, the first solid body electric guitar that there ever was. So it's kind of like they got it right the first time, and it's an incredible design. It's so functional, and so you could play really any form of music on it that you could possibly dream of. It's just a creative tool, it's such a creative tool. So that's like me, I pick it up and I just play. I'm not thinking of rock, blues, country, rockabilly, jazz. I'm not thinking that. I don't think in terms of bags anyway. I don't like the way Danny Gatton used to call it, like, what bag do you play in, It's an old expression, but I don't think of that. I just think of it as music. So the guys on this album are pretty much the same way. I mean, but career-wise, we have to get pigeonholed. Like, oh, this one's a country artist, this one's a blues artist. It's like you called me a blues guy when we first started this conversation, and I don't think of myself as a blues guy. I mean, my roots are in the blues. But my roots are just as in the country, just as country too, and rock and roll, and so who knows? It's all it's all a mixed bag. That's what I love about this album. I mean, it's going to get probably in the Americana category. You know, that's the best way of describing it. You know,
okay.
American music.
All right, and you mentioned that Telemasters is a companion piece to your Slide Guitar Summit, and
yes,
you have Johnny Winter on the Slide Guitar Summit on his last studio recording. You saw him at Woodstock. What was it like? Seeing someone, it was basically an unknown person playing at Woodstock, and 50 years later, or nearly 50 years later, you're working with someone who became one of your idols.
Well, I saw him there. He was already a big name when he played at Woodstock because he was this legendary blues guy. It's like, oh my God, he got $100,000, which at that time had been unheard of. So there was all this hype about him that he actually got $100,000 to sign his record contract. That was a big deal. And of course, he was albino. He's a blues guy. He played a lot of slide guitar. And then at Woodstock, he brings out his brother, also albino. Edgar Winter. Well, that was the first time anybody saw Edgar Winter. So then Edgar comes out, and I was right in the front. In fact, me and Johnny talked about it. There's one clip on YouTube where we're sitting and talking about it. This guy did a movie about it called Brass, Glass, and Steel, about the making of my album. And, the making of Arlen Roth's Slide Guitar Summit. So you see me sitting down with Johnny and recording, and also talking about Woodstock and talking about Rocket 88. Johnny goes, well, they say it was the first rock and roll song. He says, but it just sounds like blues to me, And then we're talking about Woodstock. He goes, oh, it was such a mess, because it really was such an incredible mess. I mean, when I saw him, I was standing in front. I was in 2 feet of mud, and I was pulling people off of the light extensions that were going down into the mud because they were all shorted out, and people were getting they kept going, they're barefoot. A lot of them were barefoot, and they're going, there's broken glass. I said, that's not broken glass. You're getting shocks. So I had to pull these people off of these wires. They would slip and fall and grab a wire. I'm like, oh, my God. And I remember feeling the electricity through them when I grabbed them and pulled them off. So it was pretty bad at that point, because that's pretty much the end of the festival, So it was just a lot of garbage, a lot of mud. And Johnny was on when Hendrix was supposed to be on. And by the time Hendrix came on, I could actually hear him from my front porch, because we only lived about 3/4 of a mile from the Woodstock site. I grew up in that town of White Lake, New York. Like every summer, we had a summer house that was on the lake in White Lake. So I was 16 then. And then when I was 17, we played the first Woodstock anniversary there. I had a band called Steel, who were living with me actually in college when I was in Philadelphia. And we were the only band. So we played for 3 days, and we played about 4 to 5 hours every day. And there were supposedly thousands. I mean, I don't know the actual number. Somebody told me 40,000. I don't know if it was that many, but there were certainly thousands of people who came back that following year, which was 1970. So So yeah, that was like part of my Woodstock experience. They just interviewed me up there. They had me up at Bethel Woods, and they're doing a film about the Woodstock generation and the Woodstock experience. So I got to tell all my stories, which ended up filling up 4 hours. So.
Did when you and Johnny were talking in the studio, did he talk about his work with Jimmy and Jimmy just like really
Jimmy
didn't
who?
want to? Jimi Hendrix.
Jimmy? No, he just talked about the fact that he was, he said nobody knew when they were going on. He said, he said, because when he went on, that was supposed to be Jimi Hendrix's slot. But everything got backed up, because Jimi Hendrix, the reason Jimi Hendrix closed the festival was because he had a thing in his contract that he had to be the headliner. He had to be the last performer. Unfortunately, with that festival, that meant that you were playing for the least amount of people because that was when everybody already was leaving, but they didn't know it was going to turn into Calcutta, So it was really, but I could walk back and forth. I walked back and forth every day because it was just walking distance from where I lived, with a 500,000 people thrown in between. It's pretty wild.
So
pretty wild.
Maybe people are learning today that Johnny played at Woodstock, and he doesn't show up on the movie or the CD. But probably a lot of people don't know that Edgar also played Woodstock and came in and played
he brought him
sax.
Out. He brought him out. It was like my brother Edgar. I'm like, Edgar? And then I realized he was saying Edgar, My brother Edgar. And then boom, he came out. I'm like, what's this now? And he played sax, and that was just very early on. But he just made him like part of his set, part of his show. But Johnny was phenomenal. I mean, he put on such a great show. And I told him, I said, man, ever since that moment of me seeing you, that just was fantastic. It was so galvanizing. He was such an electric performer, and he played so fast, and there were a lot of fast players at that thing. Alvin Lee, with 10 Years After, also a great performance, But yeah, Johnny was one of the last acts. He was like right before Hendrix, and at that point, it was already the sun was starting to come up. It was like 4:30 in the morning, whatever it was. So I went home, and then I could hear Hendrix just drifting across the lake. I could tell exactly when Hendrix was playing. I could hear it. So it was pretty exciting, but it was one of the best things about it was because being from White Lake, we were always worried that it was going to destroy the area or whatever. But the following years, the field there went back to just being a normal grassy field that only those who were there would even know that it was where the Woodstock Festival was. Years later, they put that plaque there, and so that's how people knew. But otherwise, you had to actually know it yourself, because it was just. I loved how it just went back to nature. Now they have the Bethel Woods concert hall and museum and everything there, which is really nice. They really did a good job with it.
Okay, it is. Yeah, since this year is the 50th anniversary of Woodstock, is there some kind of reunion concert in the works?
Yeah, from what I understand. I mean, I know Mike Lang, the guy who did the original festival, is going to be doing something up at Watkins Glen, New York. which I think they had a big concert there at some point, maybe 10 years after the Woodstock Festival or whatever, but it's at Watkins Glen. It's not where the Woodstock site was. But I think where the Woodstock Festival actually was, I think they're going to have some kind of concert celebration there as well, and I hope to be a part of that.
Cool. Oh,
you know,
have to come back in the summer and tell us more about.
Yeah, sure.
What's in the works as we get closer to the date.
Yeah, I really don't know much about it. You know, I mean, I've had a couple of emails, and they were like very interested in doing it because I said, look, I mean, I didn't play Woodstock, but I played the first anniversary of Woodstock, you know, and plus I'm from that town, and I've made a name for myself, and I'd like to be a part of it, you know. One of the things I heard that I think is terrible is that the other concert, the one that's going to be at Watkins Glen or wherever, they're having all these like copy bands, you know, these cover bands, like that's got nothing to do with what this should be about, you know. Or they're going to have like an artificial Jefferson Airplane band there, or they're going to have a Grateful Dead copy band. Like, get the people who are good now, you know, get just the way you did back then. And some of them are still alive, of course. You can have Santana. You could have Crosby, Stills, and Nash. You could have any number of
John
people.
Fogerty.
John Fogerty, who I'm a huge fan of his. He told me he learned from my videos. I was trying to get a gig playing with him. He's like, gig? He's like, you're my teacher. You're the reason I play better. I'm like, what? You're kidding me. So John Fogerty learned from my tapes. That was pretty amazing. I said, well, take me on the road, man. I'll give you free lessons on the tour bus, you know. It's like, come on, John. But he's great. He's phenomenal.
I hope that happens. Stop by my area. I'd like to see that one. But,
yeah.
You also have on the Telemasters and Slide Guitar Summit CDs. You have return artists like Jack Pearson from the Allman Brothers and the wonderful Cindy Cash Dollar. What's it like working with Cindy? She's playing like a dobro.
No, she's playing steel guitar. She's playing steel guitar. Okay. Yeah. She's fantastic. She's great. She's also been, playing a lot with me in my band too, as part of my band. And I always knew of her, and she always knew of me. We had played on a couple of albums together without meeting. I think we were on a couple of like Livingston Taylor albums and stuff, but we never met because the sessions were not at the same time. But she grew up in the town of Woodstock, New York. But she spent many, many years with Asleep at the Wheel and other artists, and she ended up living in Austin, Texas, for a long time. So now she's back in New York. She's moved back, and then we really got to know each other. And we've done some concerts. We've actually done some concerts where it's just she and I with no band. We did something up at the Stone Mountain Arts Center in Maine. It was just me and her, and she's great like that too. She and I are both, if you put our years together as sidemen, it's like 100 years of experience. So she's played with 1 million people, and I've played with 1 million people. So it's great when we work off of each other like that because we have those similar kind of instincts, those well-honed natural instincts as musicians. She's great. She's really, really amazing. And Jack Pearson is, you just can't say no to the guy because he's so phenomenal and he's so great at everything he does. put a Telecaster in his hands, and he's a Telemaster, With a slide guitar in his hands, he's a slide guitar master. He's amazing. And I love the way he sings. I think he's just a great singer. So he wanted to contribute to this album, and I was like, sure. And, in fact, he's the guy that brought in Joe Bonamassa, too. Bonamassa had been doing some playing with him somewhere. I think maybe it was in Nashville. He sat in with him or something. And so Joe was like, man, I want to do that album too, So that's why on that track, that's Joe's Blues, it's me, Jack, and Joe. It's 3 on that. That's how that happened.
And Jack is on the lead-off track, Do What's Right on Slide Guitar Summit. And
that's a great song. Great song.
Yeah, it really is. And I thought he was a great choice to, during his stint with the Almonds. And
yep.
And some of his other videos you can find on YouTube. He's just phenomenal with.
He's amazing. He's a master.
Yeah,
he's
jazz.
A master at anything he does. He can sit down and be as good a mandolin player as anybody. I love the way he plays classical and flamenco stuff. It was cool. He had there was a show here in my town where he was playing with Les Brers, meaning like the brothers, and it's all the people who were either formerly in the Allman Brothers or had been in the Allman Brothers since the beginning. And so he called me up on stage, and I went up and played with them. It was amazing, because that's when Butch Trucks was still alive, and J-Mo, the other drummer, and the only thing that confused me was, like when you bring up somebody and they're playing with you, and you're going to give them the cue, like play, like usually you point or you nod your head or something that lets you know it's time for me to play. All Pearson does is he stands in front of you and then he stares at your guitar. And I'm like, why are you looking at my guitar like that? I realized, that means I'm supposed to play. Like he'll stop the band, just like stop. And then he's looking at the guitar like it's talking to him. You know what I mean? I'm like, I get it. This means I should play. Nobody's ever done that with me before, where they just look at the instrument and that means, okay, I'm supposed to play. Because I'm up there, I'm trying to be really careful, You got a whole bunch of great musicians on stage. I don't want to step on anybody. But Jack is, all of his takes, all of his songs on both of those albums are one take. That's it, just 1, 2, 3, let's go, and including his vocals. He's singing while he's playing. So, he, like me, we're big believers in, the spontaneity and that your first take is always going to be your best. So it's great working with Jack. I would say that makes him the easiest, and also for some people it would be hard, but for all of us it makes him the easiest guy in the world. You're in there 5-10 minutes and you're done. That's it. I mean, the guy's got so much music in him, and it just draws it out of all of us. Tom Hambridge, the producer, who just won that Grammy with Buddy Guy the other night. Tom's the drummer too, so Tom was just like, boom, he just took off like a freight train. It's so great working with Jack.
Yeah, and on the Slide Guitar Summit, you have David Lindley, and it sounds like you two were having a great time. And he's was
it was
pushing you to keep playing, and it's really enjoyable hearing that. Her mind is gone. Can you tell us a little bit
hair.
Working? Yeah. Can you tell us a little bit about working with David? He sounds like a really has a good sense of humor. There's just something that comes off of that track that just really pulls you in.
Yeah. Well, the great thing about that track, Her Mind Is Gone, I've always loved David, and we had played together once at a NAMM show, just at Seymour Duncan's booth. We just started playing, and he was playing some reggae, and then he started talking like a Jamaican. He'll spend a whole day and not lose the accent. He'd be like, "Oh, man, you play so good, man. I love how you play, man." But he'll just keep on going. That's him like for that whole day. And so I said, I really want you to play on this album, and you're coming to New York. He was coming to New York to play at the Iridium, which was the club where Les Paul always held fort. Every Monday night, Les Paul played there for years, and I played with him many times there, and I've performed there a lot too. But I said, why don't we go into the studio the day before? Oh, I don't like to record the day before I perform. Okay, David. Well, how about the day after? No. I don't like to perform. I don't like to record the day after I perform. I said, well, I got an idea. How about you just call me up, have me come up on stage, and we will record live. And because I know that the Iridium had the ability to make a good recording out of it, and because usually when you do a show at the Iridium, when you leave, they've already got CDs for people of the show. So they record it and they start printing them like right in the back, before people even pay their tabs at the bar or whatever. So David said, "That's a great idea, man." So, he called me up and we did that song. He had the idea to do Her Mind Is Gone. And what was really sweet was, even though it was a live show and it was the last song of the night, he made sure we recorded it twice. So I had stuff to use in case I could get stuff from a better take, So he's like, "Come on, man, let's do it again." I think he says that at the end of the song. He goes, "You want to do it again?" And he introduces me like I'm like this blue, like, Arlen Roth. I'm like, I never heard my name like that, Arlen Roth. And then only Tony Bird, who was this African singer I used to play with, he'd go, Arlen Roth, Arlen Roth. So people thought my name was just Arlen Roth, like it was just like a sound, And working David's just amazing. He's amazing. What a great musician and super funny guy. I mean, we had, it's amazing. Like, we never really did anything together before that, and it's as if we knew each other our whole lives, as if we had parallel experiences. That's what it's like with working with these people like Cindy and David and Steve Wariner. You walk in and you're joined. You're joined at the hip. It's amazing.
Yeah, Arlen, you just mentioned the Iridium has the CDs available of the show. Before.
Yeah.
Yeah, you can get out the door. There's YouTube. Videos that keeps artists in front of listeners. Way to get your name out there, foot in the door.
Sure.
However you want to use the forum. But how was all this social media, the new technology? helping you. I know, like sometimes these media venues aren't paying you, but it does make the audience aware of who you are. So how have things changed with technology just in the last 10 years or so?
Well, I think YouTube is probably the greatest thing that ever came down the pike. It's probably one of the greatest accomplishments of humanity, because you get to see almost all of humanity on YouTube. It's like I could do a gig for 6 people, only 6 people showing up, but next thing you know, 10,000 people get to see it. So everything is greatly accelerated, and it brings your viewers. Like I'll see a clip that I did that somebody may have recorded and put on YouTube, and I say, wow, I like that, and then I'll grab it and I'll put it on Facebook, where I've got thousands and thousands of people, and next thing you know, everybody's learning about your music more. Like even people who are already my fans, I can triple or quadruple the output that I can give them, that I can reach them with. I think it's great. It really is great. So it's one of the best things ever. I mean, my God, I just can't believe it. I mean, I can grab the most esoteric things that I want to watch, and all of a sudden there they are. So I think it's a great thing. I mean, it didn't help at all with my lessons, because now everybody watches everything for free. Even my Gibson lessons, which were, I had over 1,000 lessons on Gibson.com, Gibson guitars, and now a lot of those ended up on YouTube just by people filming them from their computer or filming them from their television sets and putting it on YouTube as well. And, some of them will have like 70, 80,000 views, and it'll be like the full lesson or whatever it might be. Even my old Hot Licks lessons, there are Hot Licks lessons on there that are an hour and a half long, and they're in one shot. Boom. So that, that changed everything, really, So.
And Arlen, on the Slide Guitar Summit, a lot of the songs are more recent blues songs. You're not going all the way back to the Robert Johnson days or the early Muddy Waters. It's just a little bit more contemporary.
Well, some of them are. Some of them are, like "Dust My Broom," and that's a Robert Johnson song. Of course, we're doing it more on the Elmore James style, but some of it's pretty early stuff. But yeah, some of it's more contemporary. It's true.
Is Telemasters the same, in the same vein, where it's a little bit more recent songs?
I guess. I mean, a couple of them are my songs, but if you look at something like Remington Ride, which kicks off the album, that's a very classic old steel guitar Western swing piece, by Herb Remington. Key to the Highway, that's an old blues that Jack did in a contemporary way. White Lightning with Steve Cropper, that's a new piece that he wrote. Bunky, which I did with Brad Paisley, that's a song that I recorded not even all that long ago. It was on an album about 12 years ago, an album I did called Landscape, and that's dedicated to my late daughter Jillian, because when she was a baby I used to call her Bunky. So that's for her. And Rumble, Rumble, that's a classic old, stroll rock piece by Link Ray, except I did it with Will Ray. I figured his name's close enough that he can do Rumble. Mrs. Robinson, obviously, with Albert Lee, that's it's Simon and Garfunkel. I played that with them every night in front of 100,000 people. Satisfied Mind is very old. Roadworthy is one of my songs. Tennessee Waltz, of course. So I think actually there's a lot of early traditional stuff on this album. I did Ghost Riders in the Sky, which is the second time I've ever recorded that. Promised Land, that's Chuck Berry, So I wanted to keep it eclectic, but I love paying tribute to the old songs and doing something new with them and letting them push, letting it push the envelope. The minute I said Remington Ride to Steve Wariner, he said, I have to do that. I've got to do that. He says, that is my song. He says, you can't give that to anyone else. I said, okay, you got it, man, but most of the other songs I kind of chose what I thought would be appropriate for me and that artist, It kind of evoked their sound or their approach. Bill Kirchen, I had this song called Tough Telly, which was like an instrumental that I had laying around for a long time, and I even kept writing it while I was in the studio. I kept coming up with parts, as we were developing it in the studio. So very organic, creative process. So, and then once you're done with the album, you're done. That's it. You walk away and you start thinking about the next one.
Okay, and you just mentioned Steve Cropper.
Yeah, that was great.
Yeah, and he means a lot to me. Just from watching, growing up watching the Blues Brothers movie, and you were involved with some of the early stages of the
from
Blues
the very
Brothers
first day.
and
first day.
Can you tell us about working with those guys?
Well, I was very thankful that Dan Aykroyd let me talk about this on his show. He has a syndicated radio show called Elwood's Bluesmobile, and he had me on there. He's of course being Elwood Blues. He's not being Dan Aykroyd, but he's there talking to me, and he let me talk about it because what happened was I was doing Saturday Night Live in 1978 with Art Garfunkel because I was touring with Garfunkel that year, and all of a sudden John Belushi comes up to me and Aykroyd. They both come up and they go, because it's a long process doing that show. You work on it for 4 days until you finally do it on Saturday. So they said on Saturday night, you have 3 audiences. You have one test audience, then you have a live audience, but it's not the Saturday Night Live yet, and then finally the third show, which is the live show. The concept is that by the time you're on live television, you're already blind from the experience, and you just go through it, and you don't care, and you have no more nerves anymore, and you're loose. So he comes up to me with these shades and glasses, and these shades and the hat, and he says, "Put these on. We're going to do this blues song, and we're going to warm up the crowd. We're just going to warm up the crowd." In fact, I have pictures of me and Garfunkel and with Belushi in the Blues Brothers outfit, the first time he ever put it on. And he says, "But you got to teach me a song, man. I need to know a song." So I said, "Okay, here's Rocket 88, which is the one that I did with Johnny Winter as well." But this is many years before that. And I said, and I remember I had to write the lyrics for him on a napkin, He's going, we're standing in the hall, we're going, "Oh yeah, I heard jalop, you heard noise they make." Like he was trying to get the lyrics. And then we just went out and did it. We warmed up the crowd. And, we used some of the band members from Saturday Night Live, who I think ended up becoming part of the Blues Brothers bit, like Lou Marini on saxophone and those kind of people. So that was fun just to like suddenly do, and they weren't called the Blues Brothers yet. They weren't called anything. It was just, we're going to go up there. To me, it was like, we're going to go up there and we're going to pretend to be the Paul Butterfield Blues Band, That's what it looked like to me. Because, they always had the shades and the hat and whatever. So that was the beginning of it. And that was really, really cool because you got to realize at that point it was really blues. When they started doing it later on, to me it was really an imitation of Sam and Dave, which is like a soul act. And, of course, Steve Cropper, was the original guy with all those people, with Sam and Dave, with Wilson Pickett, with Otis Redding. That's all Steve Cropper. So Cropper, when they was shooting a little film, during the making of my Telemasters, and Cropper goes, well, I guess Arlen was busy while I was busy because I don't have any Arlen Roth stories. And I said, well, I got Steve Cropper stories. Because when I was touring with John Prine in 1975, Cropper was producing his album. And then we all had a big party at Jose Feliciano's house, and I remember we were bowling. Like Jose Feliciano had a big bowling alley there at his house, and Cropper rolled the ball, and he only knocked down one pin, just on the end. And I called him Cropper the Chopper, because he just chopped. That's called a chop in bowling, But we had a great time, and but he just didn't remember me from those days. But we had actually done other recording together as well, But I was just a 21-year-old kid back then, and he was this guy with this super long hair, and who used to have a crew cut, with Booker T and the MGs. So, but he is fabulous. And he's just great to work with, and loves to tell stories. When we're doing that kind of session, it's like 90% stories and 10% recording. Really, really amazing. And he loved telling stories about Duck Dunn, his famous bass player, partner, and stuff, and just. What a blast to work with these people, bring in all this experience, all this stuff, and all they want to do is have a good time, They've already slayed their dragons. They just want to, make a good record, make some good music, and it's a pleasure to work with them, really.
And
he was the first guy, too, first guy on the album, so...
And you just mentioned, being on Saturday Night Live, and you have a show coming up. We're going to be working with another Saturday Night Live musician in a couple months.
Oh, yeah?
G.E. Smith.
Oh, G.E. Smith. Yeah, he played a lot on Saturday Night Live, sure. Yeah, we're going to be together. It's already sold out. We got a show down at Yorma's Ranch, Yorma's Fur Peace Ranch, down in Ohio, there, southern Ohio. And so me and GE, we've done a few gigs together from time to time. So they're doing sort of a Telemasters thing with me and him. So that should be fun. And then some other gigs after that and some gigs before that too. My little Ohio swing of kicking off the Telemasters album.
Okay, and if people want to learn more about that, it's on your website. You want to give that?
Yep.
Everything's
plug? On my website, arlenroth.com, ARLENROTH, Arlen Roth. It's on there. And, we'll keep adding some other things. I know I'm doing this Legends TV show. I don't know when that is. I think it's April 19th, right before the tour. Doing that up in Massachusetts. That's a big show. And they've already done about 100 shows there. That reaches a lot of states. And, of course, then it ends up on YouTube and stuff. So that's really cool. So I'm looking forward to that, and we're just going to roll out the album and be on the road doing as many gigs as we possibly can. I got a gig coming up in New York City for that at the Cutting Room, which will be May 3rd. That'll be at the Cutting Room. That'll be the East Coast release of the album, and big party and stuff. So looking forward to it.
And you also have recently released Painted Black, and it's your tribute to the Stones, and
acoustic Stones.
You mentioned a little bit of you and Lexi worked with Keith Richards, but you have a longer history with them.
He's on the album. We never ran into each other or anything, but everybody's on that album. Everybody had their own day. It's like Keith Richards, Steve Miller, me, Slash, Jose Feliciano, on and on and on. There's like a million people. Everybody wanted to pay tribute to Les Paul, obviously. So it was a great album. It was a PBS special too. It was on TV. Showing all the sessions and stuff.
Okay, and you've worked with Mick Taylor as well.
Sure. Oh yeah, Mick Taylor, good friend.
Yeah. I'm sure Mick has a lot to say about his, 5 or 6 years with the Stones. What did he have to say about being the lead guitarist for the greatest band?
We didn't really talk about it too much. At that time, it didn't seem like it was a good subject to bring up.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. But on the video, he played with me, and we played together, and we talked about things. And he's a very soft-spoken guy. He's very not a man of many words. So it was hard for me to draw stuff out of him, very shy. So that was, in the early days of Hot Licks Video, a lot of those things were like that, where I had to kind of do the video with the person, like Lonnie Mack or, James Burton or whoever it might have been, and I had to kind of like get them to, I have to make sure, because I'm the producer, I'm the producer and the director, and it's my concept. And some of them were just like frozen in front of the camera. They'd freeze up and get scared and get nervous. Mick Taylor said to me, he said, "That was the most difficult gig I've ever done." I said, "Really?" I said, "And playing with the Stones at the age of 22, that wasn't difficult?" But he said that was the toughest thing he'd ever did. I'm like, oh, man, wow. But, it ended up being a pretty good video, and we hung out a lot together during that time. We did some gigs around New York City. We did some jamming together at, the Lone Star Cafe, and we played together at a club called The Bottom Line. And that was the first time I ever met Eric Johnson, because Eric Johnson was opening for us. And that was like the first time Mick Taylor had performed in New York City in like forever, So it's pretty cool. He's a really great guy, really nice guy.
It's interesting that doing a video shoot with you is scarier than the Hyde Park concert that was his first gig
amazing.
with the Stones.
Well, you know what it is, because, when you're doing a video, you've got to talk about it. You've got to talk about what it is you do, I'm a self-taught musician, just like most of us are, but I had to delve deeply into what it was about. I wrote my first book, Slide Guitar. I wrote that when I was 19, and that's still the #1 slide guitar book in the world. So I had to kind of like take apart what it was about me that made me tick. And also I was always involved in teaching privately, I didn't have a gig like playing with the Stones, So I couldn't hide behind my guitar, I people loved the way I played guitar, but I also had to explain it, talk about it. What's all this theory that I know just because I have an ear? What's all this technique? What is it I'm doing? Why do I do what I do? Everybody wants to take lessons from me. They all want a piece of what I've got. So you have to kind of, put it together and understand what makes you tick. And as you're teaching, you're learning. That's it. No better way to learn than teaching, because then you're digging deeper and deeper and deeper. And so when I would have these people in front of the camera, I already know what they're about. So if they couldn't quite get to the subject matter, I would make sure that we did. It also used to get to a point where I would throw questions at them and eliminate my questions. Like I did that with James Burton. James had no idea what to talk about. And I started throwing questions at him, and then we'd take my questions out. We would just edit my questions out, and it would just look like he was going from subject to subject, like that,
And on your acoustic Stones CD, Painted Black, you have a variety of choices from their career. What did you learn about playing Stones songs that made them, the top, rock band, the Beatles and Stones are the two greatest bands ever. What did you learn about their success?
Well, I mean, the songs that I chose for that album were songs of theirs that were from their earlier period, which was really the time I cared most about them. I started to not really pay too much attention to them after a certain point. But I think that I tried to get their classic material, and I think one thing was that when I started doing acoustic versions of the songs, I realized that that's probably how they wrote most of these songs, were with an acoustic guitar, just sitting around and coming up with, Lady Jane or Painted Black, or, it was nice to evoke or invoke Brian Jones, because Brian Jones was such a big part of their sound in those early days, and people don't acknowledge him enough. I mean, it was really his band, in the very beginning. So, and I've done Stone songs before. I did The Last Time on, I think it was my Lonely Street album, which is like the rarest of all my albums, which is only on vinyl, and cassette. I mean, it never came out as anything else. There's no CDs of it or anything. I just wanted to attack those songs that I loved so much, but it was great to have that take on it, because also a lot of those songs did have some acoustic guitar or some slide guitar in them, like No Expectations or Prodigal Son. So it made sense to me as a follow-up to slide guitar, because I was playing a lot of slide on it,
And I noticed on your website you had a photo of you and Jeff Beck, and of course you two around antique cars. That is a combination that has to, we have to spend a few minutes talking about Jeff and antique cars.
Well, that's my 38 Buick Street Rod, and Jeff Beck had actually come to pay his respects after I lost my wife and daughter. And so he just came. He said, "Are you anywhere near Newborough?" And I'm like, "Newborough?" I said, "Oh, Newburgh, New York." He was flying into Newburgh. So then they came, and we spent some time together that afternoon with the car and stuff, and we were talking about maybe doing a Hot Licks video for me at that point. But we had met earlier a few times, and we played together with Les Paul, and also met at a NAMM show, which was cool because he knew he was able to talk about my albums. He knew more tracks on my albums than I did on his. Seriously. He was going, "A change is going to come. Oh, when a man loves a woman." He was just going crazy about all my stuff. And I'm like, wow, Jeff Beck is a fan. It was really cool. But he's a terrific guitar player.
Oh, yeah. He's one of the best.
He is, definitely. He's somebody that's always continued to grow, with his art form.
And on for Telemasters and Slide Guitar Summit, you have as your producer Tom Hambridge.
Yes,
he has an astonishing legacy as well. Why did you pick him to help with the production of those two CDs?
Well, all my albums have always been self-produced. Like, I've almost never had an actual producer. And so then he and I used to play together around Massachusetts and Martha's Vineyard, and we did a couple of shows for President Clinton, Bill Clinton's birthday and stuff like that. And we played with Kate Taylor, James Taylor, all those folks. And we became friends, really good friends. And then one day I started hearing about him again with all these blues artists like Buddy Guy, who was one of my heroes, and, all these people he was producing. So I got in touch with him. I said, "Hey, listen, man, why don't we do a project together? Let's do something." And he was totally in, and I found out he was living in Nashville too. So he got the whole thing, in terms of helping me gather the people together who were in Nashville, and we worked in this great recording studio there. So it was very exciting for me to do. I also did Toolin' Around, which was my classic album from '89 to '93. I did a lot of that in Nashville as well, which was also an album that had a lot of duets. Me and Dwayne Eddy and Brian Setzer from the Stray Cats and, folks like that. Duke Robillard, Jerry Douglas. We had this song I wrote called Let It Slide, which is, of course, a slide song. But other than that, Tom just seemed like a natural choice. Plus, he's such a great drummer, which is how I first got to know him. So he was able to play drums on it, too. So you get two for the price of one. And he's always working with this wonderful bass player friend of mine, Tommy McDonald. So, they're like a real team of bass and drums.
Okay. And how do you choose? You're in the greater New York area. What is it about studios in Nashville where you're going? What are you looking for when you decide to do recording in a studio?
Well, these studios that we did are classic, famous studios. I let Tom choose those. I guess he probably got they're real Music Row studios, that are oozing hit records from the walls, The minute you hear what you played on there, it just works. something about it. There's something uncanny that you can't even put your finger on. But the first studio, I think, was called Soundstage, and that was amazing. And then the second studio we used was like around the corner, and that was Ronnie's place. And Ronnie meaning Ronnie Millsap, the great singer. So that was his studio, and that place became very legendary too. And of course, it's not so much the studio, but it's the people that make it happen, you know. But we just brought in all the artists, and you got good engineers and people who are used to working with that room, you know, and you know, a tried and true professional studio, not a place that has to work out any of the bugs, you know, a place that's used to people coming in, making hit records, and just having that sound. You know, there's that certain Nashville something, I don't know what it is, you know, but I think it's more of a spirit than it is something that's as tangible as, like, you know, tape and whatever, you know. That's what I think, anyway.
And coming up soon, people can read more about, you know, these background stories in Vintage Guitar Magazine, and you know, you had another interview with the Buddy Guy's Legends magazine.
Yeah, that was a big interview. Buddy Guy's Legends must have talked to me for about 2 hours also.
What, you know, when these become available, what can the readers expect to learn about you?
Gee, I don't know. Just what I've been talking about for the last hour and a half. No. You know, there's always different aspects, you know, like how I was raised or how I started off early in my career, or, you know, what it was like to play with this one or that one. Because my sideman career is a whole career unto itself, just like what I've done as a solo artist, you know. And sometimes it's been parallel. They've been parallel. So, yeah, I think they'll learn a lot. You know, they'll learn a lot. They'll also learn a lot about, like, my father, his philosophy. He was a very famous cartoonist for the New Yorker magazine and a great painter, and how he just encouraged me, you know, to be a guitar player. And he just saw it. He just could see it. He said, I can just picture that you're going to be a guitar player. I just see it, you know. And so he and I used to hang out in all the music shops when I was a kid, you know, and that story in that Stones album there where I was 11 years old buying my first guitar, my first electric guitar, and Charlie Watts was there in the store, you know. And I recognized him right away, and I got his autograph. And then years later, I was on the BBC in London. I think it was in 1988. I was on the BBC in London. I was telling that story, and all of a sudden the phone lit up, and it was them calling and say, Charlie remembered you. Charlie couldn't believe that you were the first kid in America who recognized him, you know. I said, oh, how could I not recognize him, you know? I mean, he was so obviously who he was, but this was 1964, you know. So they said, yeah, you were the first kid to ever recognize him, and Charlie couldn't believe it, you know. So I remember his autograph. He signed to Charlie Watts of the Rolling Stones, you know. So I was just 11 years old. I was getting my first little Japanese electric guitar at a little shop called Ben's Music on 48th Street, where it used to be all music shops. Now there's nothing left there. It's a shame.
Yeah. And Arlen, you just mentioned your dad was a cartoonist for the New Yorker magazine. Yeah, there's a art show for your dad's artwork. Can you tell us?
Yeah,
about
there's a place that I play. A place that I play here near New York called the Falcon. Is that what you're talking about?
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm playing the Falcon, and I said, they always have a show on the walls. They have it. It's like a gallery, but you also perform. And these shows, a lot of the artwork I was not a fan of. So I said, one day I'd love to play there, and I'd love it to be with my father's artwork on the walls. So that's what's up there now. We played there the other day, had the show, and his work is still up on the walls. It's going to be there for 2 months. It's a great club.
Cool.
So you have his paintings and his cartoons.
Okay.
And his drawings as well.
And when was he? What time period or most of his artworks on from?
I would say that the most stuff at the shows probably from the 40s and 50s and 60s, but he was active from 37, with the New Yorker. He was from 1937 to 2012. And he lived to be 100.
Wow.
So he was, and of course his cartoons still to this day are being published everywhere. He was not only in New Yorker, he was also in Playboy, in Esquire, in the Saturday Evening Post, in the New York Times, and he was one of 4 Roth brothers, all of whom were cartoonists. So that's why he became Al Ross, R-O-S-S, because they all had to take different pen names. But he was the most successful, and, of course, I'm going to say he was the best, but they were all really good, the 4 Roth brothers. So pretty amazing legacy.
Okay, and with your daughters, being involved in music and your Hot Licks series, and you gave several examples. Second, third generation of people, watching the series. What's the secret of getting younger people involved in developing these skills? As I'm sure some of it's genetics, but how do you just keep enforcing? Just stick with it.
I think it's just inspiring them. Everything's inspiration. You can't. In the end, we're all really our own teachers. We could only have our teachers holding our hands for so long. But you want to be inspired. Like I always got to be around my dad, who was just doing cartooning as a freelance thing, and he was able to watch his children grow up and not be a 9-to-5 guy, and that to me was just always the natural order of things. He'd take me to the park. We lived right around the corner from Bronx Park, and I'd go out and hit 100 home runs, and he'd chase after every ball. And then I, at the same kind of way, I brought my daughters up. It was like, let's go. Oh, it's a warm day in February. Let's go out and play some baseball. They both became gigantic, ball players. So it's like it's all about raising your children and about not missing that. Not missing that absolute joy. And, just experiencing, I think that it's like me, like I picked out the sounds that I wanted to hear when I was growing up. I would be upstate New York, but I would tune in WWVA, from Wheeling, West Virginia, so I could hear some steel guitar, so I could hear some country. You never heard any country around New York, but I had this pleasure of getting a big tube radio or like one of my little transistor radios and pulling in those far off stations and hearing what sounded like another world. I mean, look at what WSM in Nashville, meant to the whole southern part of the country, that everybody could listen to Maybelle Carter, and all of a sudden everybody wanted to play like that. Everybody gathered around the radio and listened to the Carter family and the Stoneman family and Flatt and Scruggs and whoever it might have been, or Bill Monroe. And they say, well, I want to do that. I want to play, and I want to play at the Opry one day, And you hear the Grand Ole Opry. It was like, man, it to them it must have seemed like a million miles away, just like that fantasy world of what do these people look like and what makes them sound that way, and Ernest Tubb, Patsy Cline. So the thing is, I grew up, loving and listening to artists like that in my generation. I used to have a little apartment when I first moved to Woodstock. The apartment was so small that when you opened up the front door, it hit the couch, which was on the other wall. I think it was about like 10 by 8 with onions growing out of their package, because I didn't even know how to cook. But the onions were growing. And but I would have this radio where I could tune in at night, get those radio stations that played country music, and some of the blues stations too, like from Detroit. I could pick up Detroit. I could pick up Chicago. I'd pick up Honesdale, Pennsylvania, where I would get a lot of the country that I would hear, and Wheeling, West Virginia, the Jamboree, Charlie Pride, listening to the early Dolly Parton stuff, listening to all that, and it was just phenomenal. It was like there's some periods in your life where you just grow so much when it's an art form that you love, and it just explodes. It's like when I wrote my book, like I was telling you, when I wrote my book when I was 19, I'm like, how do I know all this stuff? How is it that I know this? Where did it come from? It's almost like it materialized, So by the time I was 19, I'd already been playing for nearly 10 years, So.
Okay.
And they gave me $150 advance. And like, what are you going to do with the money? It was like I was this little boy. Oh, I'm going to put it in my piggy bank, $150 advance for that book, So.
Cool.
But anyway, you were saying something.
I forget what the question was.
Okay.
I have plenty. I have plenty more. But when you take your band out on the road, throughout the spring, who's in your band?
You tell me. No, I'm only kidding. There's a bass player is a guy named Eddy Denise, who also plays with Dion, from Dion and the Belmonts.
Mm-hmm.
And great bass player. And my other guitar player, my partner, is Chris Foley, who's a terrific guitar player in his own right, who studied with me for a while, and also he lives in Brooklyn, in New York. He plays with lots of different people. And the drummer is Peter O'Brien, who also plays with Orleans, and John Hall, who was the guy who formed Orleans, And at one point, he was our congressman here, too. So, but, so, it's a great little band, and I've had them together now for quite some time.
And you just mentioned Dion, and is on his New York Is My Home CD. He does a song with Paul Simon.
Sure.
You have, so there's a little bit of connection to both of those musicians, and then
Sure.
Jimmy Vivino is also on that CD, and he's on Slide Guitar Summit. So
yeah, why aren't I on that CD, man? I don't like it. I'm mad. No, what happened with Paul Simon was when I did the Cape Man with Paul Simon, which was his ill-fated Broadway play, but the music was great. I remember we were recording it, and I said, Paul, this stuff is so good, man. It sounds great. And he said to me, well, at least I know Dion will like it, So then I told that to Eddy, my bass player, and Eddy said, oh, man, I can't wait to tell that to Dion, that Paul Simon said, he hoped it was something that Dion would like. So, because a lot of the music was kind of like 50s, New York doo-wop kind of, that kind of stuff, a cappella even. Some of it was even a cappella, but it's great. So that maybe helped bring Paul and Dion together.
It just seems like both of them have written wonderful portraits of New York City.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, they're both really so much of New York. They're so, like Dion is from the Bronx, like me, and Paul Simon's from Queens. And, we're all New Yorkers at heart. And Paul and Dion, there's more of a connection there than most people would even think,
Yeah, it's just one of the just interesting things about having, you as a guest and a couple of your CDs. It's just all the connections that you have to so many artists, and one of, I don't know if you can hear all the dings, but one of my friends, Sereni, said, "Oh, this is just really amazing. How many of these people, she's heard of," and she mentions sometimes. Oh yeah, I remember listening to Ronnie Millsaps, and you mentioned him, his studio earlier. So that's just one of the just enjoyable aspects of having you as our concluding artist for our musical trilogy this week.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, and on Tooling Around Woodstock, that's with Levon Helm, and his daughter Amy makes an appearance, and Amy
singing
has
with my daughter Lexi.
Yeah, that's and Amy's gone on to have a successful solo career as well. Can you tell us a little bit about this father and daughter team, and Levon's legacy as well? I think it's just interesting.
At that point at all, but when she came to the session, it was pretty amazing because there was this instant kind of electricity when she walked in, and then I realized, of course, this is also the house where she was raised, where she grew up, and her dad was playing drums, and singing also, because Levon, he started singing again on my album when after he had his throat cancer, problems. And so when he started singing on that, that's before he did his Dirt Farmer record. But they ended up coming out at about the same time. But the minute Amy walked in, it was like instant connection. And she's such a good singer. She's just an incredible singer, and a great spirit. Just a wonderful, wonderful person, And so she was on that. I don't even know if there's a little bit of her on that DVD, because there was a DVD that went with that album. I think she must be on there, and also singing with Lexi too. And that was like me, also with Sonny Landreth, and Bill Kirchen is also on that album too. So, a little bit of that duet thing going on, but it was such an honor to have Levon singing, because we didn't think he was going to sing. I just thought he was playing drums, and we were using his studio, at his barn there in Woodstock. So, but I did a couple of gigs with Amy. After that, Amy's even doing some gigs now with Cindy Cash Dollar. They're doing a few gigs together. So yeah, terrific singer, great singer.
Okay, and we're kind of approaching 20 some minutes left, but we have to get to your work on the movie Crossroads. I always enjoyed watching that movie when I was in high school. How did you get involved in this movie, and what was your role?
Well, it's sort of a never-ending saga, the whole Crossroads thing. I mean, my God, But it's like a day doesn't go by when there's some other post somewhere on Facebook or wherever about me and my involvement in Crossroads, But it was, very simple. It was like I got a phone call one day when I was living up about an hour north of New York City. I got a phone call from it was from Walter Hill, who was the director of the film. And he said that Ry Cooder had told him that I was the guy to do this movie with Ralph Macchio, because Ralph Macchio lives on Long Island. And we had to make Ralph Macchio believable as a guitar player in the film. So, and then Cooder called me up, and Cooder said, "All right, you'll be creating the pieces. You've got the script. You will, do this piece for that scene. Like there's all these scenes that required guitar playing, and he had to do everything in the movie, from classical to slide to acoustic blues to electric blues. So they set it up that I would." I remember they even had to rent a car for me, because I had to drive out to his place on Long Island 4 days a week. 4 days a week for 2 months. And every one of those days I just worked with him and worked with him and worked with him. So I tried to give him enough of a foundation in faking the guitar, because he had never even played the guitar before, never even held one, which is kind of rare for his generation, I mean, he played trumpet or something, but he never played a string instrument. So it was really cool, because he would watch how I walked, how I carried a guitar case, how I sat when I played. As an actor, it was interesting watching him work, because he tried to absorb everything about me as a guitar player, not just the playing, And so that was really interesting. And to get to know him during that period of time, we had a great time together. And I'd always go out to Long Island, and sometimes we'd, go out to dinner. And he loved to play with my daughter Jillian. She she was just a baby then. And I guess this was 1984, I think. And we've, so we had the 2 months of working together before I went to L.A., and we went in the studio, and before I went down to Mississippi for 6 weeks, which was amazing, shooting on location, you know. But it was great going into the studio in L.A. because who was on drums? My all-time favorite drummer, Jim Keltner, who I fantasized about being able to play with, you know. And there's Jim Keltner playing drums. I'm like, my God. And, you know, and Cooder and the bass player from David Lindley's band and the keyboard player from Tom Petty's band. And it was incredible. And I found some of that stuff on cassette recently in my basement, and I ended up putting it up on SoundCloud so you can hear some of the original, when we were just working out ideas to do the ending, you know, and the jams and the different things in the movie, because I had to have them on cassette so I could teach them to Ralph, you know. But this is long before Steve Vai. I mean, it's 7 months before Steve Vai even became a part of it, you know. But it was such an amazing experience. I mean, every day being in another part of Mississippi, usually a cotton field or an old hotel or, you know, out somewhere where they had a rain machine making the rain, you know. And it was what an experience, you know. It was really, really great. And it was 7 months long, you know.
Okay, and we need to talk about the famous finale of the movie with Ralph,
which in my opinion is the worst part of the movie, you know, because that's when the movie got ruined. That's when it was no longer about the blues, and they ended up dating it as a 1985 metal, you know, heavy metal thing, you know. Not to put down Steve Vai, because Steve Vai and I became, you know, lifelong friends as a result of working on it together, but the original script called for, it was blues, and the ending was a slide duel between Ralph and Ry Cooder, which meant me and Ry Cooder. So when the director and the producer decided they wanted it to be more like the Karate Kid, you know, they just wanted to follow suit of the Karate Kid. So they had to get this guitar player who was a wise guy, you know, would come in and be, you know, try to beat him. And it was so bad, you know, so dumb. And me and Ry Cooder were really upset about it. And Cooder was upset also because Cooder was going to be the visual guy. He was going to actually be the Steve Vai part, you know. So then he lost the thing of actually being in the film. So, you know, I mean, so you can hear the beginnings of that slide duel between me and Ry. That's on the SoundCloud tracks that I posted, you know. But to me, it totally went downhill. Once they chose that ending, it was all right, this movie will forever be dated as that period of time, you know.
That's a good point. But
I'll say, I mean, I was the one that was hired. I was the one that was hired to make the movie authentic, and then they just took it right out of my hands, you know. Because I made everything. I had to make sure that Robert Johnson's guitar was the correct guitar. I stopped the whole day of shooting because the actor showed up with the wrong tuning pegs on his guitar. You know, they were chrome. And back in the 30s, they were supposed to be nickel and very dull. So we had to tear down that whole scene that day because it was the wrong guitar. You know, a lot of times I was in the director's chair. The director would tell me, "Arlen, you know more about this scene than me. Why don't you sit in the director's chair?" And it was such a thrill. And I think he did it to me, you know, for me, just to make me feel kind of cool too, you know, because But I'd be in the middle of a Mississippi cotton field, all of a sudden I'm directing. I'm sitting in a director's chair. It's phenomenal. What a feeling.
And that's just interesting about the just the little details that go into that movie or any movie. The tuning, the just getting the right type of metal tuning thing. So I just hope that the listeners just realize how much importance to some of those small things that really make a difference, and that's one of the nice things about.
Still see, I mean stuff. Some people I can't believe it that they actually write on Facebook. They go, "Is Ralph really playing that stuff?" And I'm thinking, how can anybody in the world think that Ralph Macchio is actually playing those guitar parts? But I made him so believable that it's possible. I was tired of seeing all these movies where the guitar player is in the wrong spot on the neck, or they're only shooting him from the neck up, or whatever it might be, or that the music is not in sync with what you're seeing. So as a musician who cares very much about that stuff, if I see one little bad thing like that in a movie, it just ruins it for me. It ruins it, because that's my area of expertise. But what they wanted me to do was not only make Ralph believable, but also make the film more authentic from the standpoint of the guitar scenes and the music scenes. So I took that really seriously, and that was great because every day there was something that they needed me for, So, and it doesn't matter whether it was L.A. or Mississippi, but it was quite an experience, for sure.
And that's just one of the positive aspects of this interview today is just the learning and inspire. We brought up inspiring earlier, and I think it's just one of the lessons that I hope the listeners come away with as you just start winding down the show is just how hard artists work, whether it's the authors we have on or the trilogy of musicians this week, and you just really are driving home that point. I just hope it helps.
That's why I did an album called "Drive It Home," because I'm driving it home. I had my first acoustic album was called "Drive It Home."
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
And okay, I just walked right into that one. But and it's Steve, and Steve has gone on to have really a distinguished career as well since the filming of Crossroads wrapped up, and
sure.
I've watched a lot of his videos on YouTube as well, and he seems to be doing, like, at least the ones I've seen were faith-inspired type songs.
Mm-hmm.
It's just nice to see what he's doing, and when we're maybe like 9-10 minutes left, but you've mentioned so many artists that I'm sure everyone in the audience knows at least couple songs by several of your friends. But who's someone that you haven't worked with but you would like to have a collaboration, to, record a song or whole album?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. Well, it's like, like now I'm getting to do this album with John Sebastian, who, I thought I was just going to do another tribute album, like because I did one for the Stones, I did one for Simon and Garfunkel, and I did one for Dylan. But he said, look, I'll join in, I'll be a part of the album, It's like me doing a Stones album and having Keith Richards do it with me, I'd like to see I'd like to do some collaborations with maybe people like that, maybe like Keith Richards or
wow.
There's just so many people that you just know that it would be fun working with them, that would be a good experience. Because I wouldn't want to work with somebody who I just admire their music, but they turn out to be like not a nice guy or not a nice woman, But you never know. You never know. I mean, I would love to do collaborating with, there's a lot of other guitar players out there that I think I could do some great work with. I have this soul project coming up that I'm doing with the great Jerry Jamot, who's a bass player who I worked with for many years. And Jerry's on all that classic B.B. King and, all those great. Well, he even did stuff back with the Muscle Shoals people. But he's on a lot of the Aretha stuff and a lot of the King Curtis. So we're going to be collaborating on those tracks, doing, a very, very serious soul album, R&B and soul. And he's just a unique bass player. The minute he touches the bass, it's him, And I've always been a real sort of connoisseur of great bass players. I've gotten to play with John Entwistle. I've gotten to play with Jack Bruce. I've gotten to play with so many greats, And Jack Bruce and I did that television show in Germany. It's kind of a nightmare, really, but I got to play with him anyway. But, it's people like that. I mean, I'd love to do. A lot of people even hit me up for like that I should be doing a part 2 of the Telemasters because there's so many great tele players. I couldn't include them all on the album. But there's a lot of guys that are really making big names for themselves, kind of like a younger generation of tele guys, But yeah, I'd love to work with. I'd love to do some stuff with Bonnie Raitt. She and I know each other for a long, long time from the days when I was with John Prine. And you just never know. I mean, you never know who could come down the pike. But I certainly, I'd appreciate if my phone would ring maybe more. And, people say like, oh, could you please do that like Arlen Roth? Well, why don't you just hire Arlen Roth, Because they say that sometimes. Like a guy will come to me and say, well, you believe that I was in the studio the other day and somebody told me to play it like you? I said, well, tell them next time to call me, So that's kind of nice. But I don't know. There's just so many great, so many great people out there. It's hard to narrow it down, But it would be a thrill to just keep on going with it as long as I can. And like for example, Tom Hambridge, my producer, produces Buddy Guy, and Buddy Guy did a video for me for Hot Licks. But I would like to play with Buddy Guy on an album. Let's do a track together. People, because he was a hero of mine growing up. So.
Yeah, for a lot of people.
Oh yeah. So he was a big influence on me, and so there's just so many folks out there. I'm so honored that I got to do stuff with Levon, and that I got to do that stuff with Johnny Winter. There's a lot of these artists, they're gone already, and we got to do something of a permanent nature. and that's really what I'm all about, is working with as many greats as I possibly can, and I want to leave as much great music behind as possible, you know.
Well, you know, this has been just a really fascinating insight into, you know, your legendary career, working with so many other people. You know, really been the soundtrack of our lives. You know, you mentioned John Entwistle. He was another one of the Woodstock performers that, you know,
that's right,
Johnny and right. You know, so we've gotten a, you know, nice little education, you know, from Woodstock today, and you know, while, you know, working with Jack Bruce from Cream on, you know, another interesting you know, person you're, you know, drawing into the discussion. So you know, we have to have you back. Yeah, so sometime soon, and you know, we're down to, you know, just under 4 minutes. You know, what's your website again? You know, do you want to plug where people can find your books and see you over the spring?
Yeah. Well, you know, my website, arlenroth.com, ARLENROTH, and you see my albums there. You see some history. You'll see some stuff about Crossroads. You'll see the links to those Crossroads tracks. You'll see, of course, tons of photographs. It's a newly revamped site, which is much more sort of up to date. And you know, you get to see the gigs that are coming up, and that's sort of like a different thing every day. You know, new gigs coming down the pike, and you know, when the album will be released, like the official release for the Telemasters, I believe, is February 22nd, because there's already been hundreds of copies sent out to all the radio stations and also to the press. And I think we're going to have like a cover story on Vintage Guitar magazine about it. And I've been on the cover of that magazine before. And, you know, just look forward to, you know, taking a good ride with this album, because it's got a lot of star power on it, and I think it's got a lot of eclectic, radio-friendly music, you know. So a great vocalist on Promised Land, Sweet Mikey C., who's a good friend of mine from Nashville, who works a lot with the Oak Ridge Boys, and he's singing on that song. And, of course, Jack Pearson's vocals are great. And Cropper sings on that White Lightning song, which is not the White Lightning most people know from George Jones. But it's called White Lightning. And Cropper, it's the first time I've heard Cropper sing. So there's a historic moment. But, you know, again, it's just such a joy to work with these people, you know, and in this case, you get an album where you get to work with 14 of them. It's just incredible. So I hope everybody enjoys it and likes it out there, and that everybody who's bought it already has given me great feedback, and that they really, really do love it. So
okay, you guys,
that's fun.
We're down to seconds here. Thank you, Arlen, and Mark, you have to say goodbye now.
Hey, thanks for producing these 3 shows, Barbara, and thank you, Arlen. We will be talking soon, and thanks everyone for listening to the 3 shows